The scanner on Graal's wrist had never been wrong. In 15 years of hunting bounties across the galaxy, the small device had saved his life more times than he could count. It told him which species carried hidden venom, which ones could see in the dark, which ones he should kill quickly, and which ones he could take his time with. Tonight, it told him something strange. Graal stood at the entrance of a dirty cantina on Drift 9, a trading station that floated at the edge of civilized space. The place smelled like engine grease and cheap alcohol. Criminals, smugglers, and desperate souls filled the tables. His 4 arms hung loose at his sides, and his scaled body towered over most of the other patrons. He was looking for a woman who had stolen data from his employer. The information said she would be here tonight. His scanner swept the room automatically. Each species lit up with a color code. Green for harmless, yellow for caution, red for dangerous. Most of the room glowed green and yellow. Weak creatures, prey animals who had learned to talk and build ships, but were still prey in their hearts. Then the scanner found someone at the bar. A small figure sat alone, drinking something brown from a dirty glass. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and wore the rough clothes of a cargo worker. Her hands were wrapped around her drink, and she stared at nothing in particular. The scanner flashed bright red. The words appeared on the small screen. Species, human, Earthborn, threat classification, extreme, advisory, avoid contact. Graal laughed out loud. Several aliens nearby flinched at the sound and moved away from him. Good. They knew what he was. They knew his reputation. Graal the Collector, they called him. He kept pieces of his kills as trophies. But this warning about the human was ridiculous. He had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about humans. They came from a death world, people said. A planet where everything wanted to kill everything else. The gravity was crushing. The air was poison. The animals were monsters. Graal did not believe these stories that he had seen humans before. They were small and soft. No claws. No venom. No natural armor. They bled easily and broke easily. They were just another weak species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. The scanner was wrong. It had to be that he walked toward the bar. Behind him, he heard chairs scraping as other patrons quickly left. The bartender, a 6-limbed creature named Dox, looked up and then looked away just as fast. The human woman did not move. Graal stopped beside her. Up close, she was even smaller than he expected. Her shoulders were narrow. Her arms were thin. She looked tired, like she had not slept well in a long time. "You have something that belongs to my employer," Graal said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. The woman took a sip of her drink. "I think you have the wrong person. I do not make mistakes." He grabbed her arm with one of his 4 hands. His claws dimpled her skin but did not break it. "Not yet. Give me the data chip, and I will make your death quick." The cantina had gone completely silent. Graal noticed that even Dox had disappeared behind the bar. A small, furred creature that worked as a waitress was hiding in the corner, watching with huge, frightened eyes. Everyone was watching. The human woman looked down at the hand gripping her arm. She looked at it for a long moment, like she was thinking about something far away. "Let go," she said quietly. Graal squeezed harder. He felt the bones in her arm shift under his grip. Any other species would be screaming by now. The human just sat there. "I said I heard you." His grip tightened again. He wanted to see her cry. He wanted to hear her beg. "You are in no position to give orders." The human woman slowly set down her drink. She turned on her stool to face him fully. Her eyes met his. Graal had looked into the eyes of hundreds of species. He had seen fear in all its forms. Panic. Desperation. The blank acceptance of creatures who knew they were about to die. He saw none of that in this human's eyes. What he saw was cold, patient, calculating, like she was looking at a math problem she had already solved. "You should have listened to your scanner," she said. Graal glanced down at his wrist. The device was still flashing red, still showing that same warning. "Avoid contact. Avoid contact. Avoid contact." He laughed again. "This little thing? It is broken. You are just a soft, weak." The human moved. One moment she was sitting on the stool. The next moment she was standing, and Graal felt a sharp pain in his wrist. He looked down. She had done something to his hand, twisted it in a way that should not have been possible. His claws had released her arm without him telling them to. The pain was incredible. Nothing should have been able to do that to him. He looked at the human woman. She had not stepped back. She had not run. She was standing right in front of him, inside his reach, where all four of his arms could grab her. She should have been terrified. Instead, she rolled her shoulders and cracked her neck. Her expression shifted from tired resignation to something else entirely. Something that made Grawl's scales prickle with a feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. Fear. I was having a bad day, the human said calmly. You just made it worse. Mira had worked at the cantina for 3 years. In that time, she had seen many terrible things. Fights, murders, things that gave her nightmares for weeks. But she had never seen anything like this. The small felon waitress crouched behind an overturned table, her large eyes watching the scene unfold. Her fur stood on end. Every instinct in her prey species body was screaming at her to run, to hide, to get as far away as possible. She could not look away. The human woman named Nina stood in front of Grawl. She was so small compared to him. The top of her head barely reached his chest. His forearms could wrap around her twice. His claws were longer than her fingers, by every measure that mattered. She should have been helpless. But Mira knew something the rest of the galaxy often forgot. She had grown up on a colony ship where humans made up half the crew. She had seen what they could do when pushed. Humans were not normal. Their home planet was a nightmare. Mira had learned about it in school, back when she was young. Earth had gravity so strong it crushed the bones of other species. The air contained oxygen, a gas that was literally fire waiting to happen. The planet was covered in massive oceans of water that could drown you, mountains that could freeze you, deserts that could cook you alive. And the animals. The animals were monsters. Humans had evolved to survive all of it. Their bodies were built different. Their bones were dense as stone. Their muscles could work for hours without rest. They healed from wounds that would kill anyone else. But the most terrifying thing about humans was not their bodies, it was their minds. Humans did not freeze when danger came. They did not run unless running was the smart choice. When faced with something that wanted to kill them, humans got calm, focused. They became problem-solving machines, and the problem was how to kill you first. Grawl did not know any of this. He only saw a small, soft creature with no claws and no armor. He lunged forward with all four arms. Nina moved like water. She slipped under his first grab, ducked around his second, and drove her palm into the soft tissue under his left arm. Grawl roared in pain and swung at her head. She was not there. Her elbow crashed into his knee joint. Something cracked. Grawl stumbled, and Nina was already behind him. Her fingers found the gap between his scales at the base of his spine and pressed hard. Grawl screamed. He spun around and caught her with a backhand blow. The force sent Nina flying across the cantina. She hit the wall hard enough to crack the metal plating and crumpled to the floor. Mira whimpered. No one could survive that. Then Nina stood up. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. Her left arm hung at a wrong angle. She was breathing hard, but she was standing. She looked at her arm, grabbed it with her other hand, and pulled. There was a wet popping sound as her shoulder slid back into place. Nina's face twisted with pain, but she did not scream. She did not cry. She just flexed her fingers to make sure the arm still worked. Grawl stared at her. His scanner was beeping frantically on his wrist, throwing data at him that he could not ignore anymore. Heart rate, elevated but controlled. Adrenaline levels, extreme. Pain response, suppressed. What are you? He whispered. Earthborn, Nina said. She wiped the blood from her eyes. You should have read the warning. She started walking toward him, not running, not charging, walking, steady and calm, like she had all the time in the world. Grawl backed away. For the first time in years, he felt small. This creature should be dead. He had hit her hard enough to kill a Kreth warrior. Hard enough to shatter the spine of any normal species. She was walking toward him with murder in her eyes. He swung at her again. She caught his arm, twisted her body, and used his own momentum to throw him off balance. Her knee came up and connected with his face. Scales cracked. Blood sprayed. Grawl hit the ground hard. He tried to get up, but Nina was already on top of him. Her hands found his right arm and bent it backward. The joint snapped like a dry branch. Grawl screamed again. Stop, he begged. Stop. I will leave. I will. She broke his second arm. Then his third. Mira watched with a mixture of horror and something else. Something that felt almost like satisfaction. She had seen Grawl before. She knew what he did to people weaker than him. She had seen the way he smiled when he hurt them. He was not smiling now. Nina stood over his broken body, breathing hard but steady. 3 of his 4 arms lay at angles that made Myra's stomach turn. His face was covered in blood. The human woman was injured too. Mira could see the way she favored her left side. Broken ribs, probably. Maybe worse, but she was still standing. She always kept standing. Nina grabbed Grawl by his remaining good arm and pulled him close to her face. Her voice was quiet and cold. "Who sent you?" Grawl looked up at her with eyes full of something Mira had never seen in him before. Pure, animal terror. "Kellen," he whispered. "Boss Kellen. He sent me. Please. Please, I told you. Just let me, Kellen." Nina's jaw tightened. Her eyes went distant for a moment, like she was seeing something far away. "Good." She dropped Grawl to the floor and stepped back. He lay there, whimpering. Mira slowly came out from behind her table. Her legs were shaking, but she made herself walk toward her friend. Because that was what Nina was, even if the human did not know it. In the 3 weeks since Nina had arrived at Drift 9, she had been kind to Mira. She had protected her from handsy customers. She had shared her food when Mira was short on credits. Nina turned to look at her. The cold focus in her eyes faded, replaced by something softer. Something almost like guilt. "Sorry," Nina said quietly. "I made a mess." Mira looked at Grawl's broken body. She looked at the cracked wall. She looked at the overturned tables and the blood on the floor. Then she looked at her friend. "He deserved it," Mira said simply. For the first time since the fight began, Nina almost smiled. The security footage spread across Drift 9 like fire through dry grass. Within 3 hours, everyone on the station had seen it. Within 6 hours, it had been copied and sent to a dozen other stations. By morning, half the sector was watching a small human woman break a Valorian enforcer like a cheap toy. Nina sat in Myra's small apartment while the felon cleaned her wounds. The cuts were already starting to close. Her shoulder ached but worked fine. 2 of her ribs were cracked, but she had taped them up and they would heal in a few weeks. Humans healed fast. Another gift from their death world. "You need a real doctor," Mira said softly. Her small, furry hands were gentle as she applied medicine to the cut on Nina's forehead. "I have had worse." Mira did not argue. She had learned that arguing with Nina was pointless. A knock came at the door. Nina was on her feet instantly, her body coiled and ready. Mira placed a calming hand on her arm. "It is okay. I know who it is." She opened the door to reveal an old human man. He was tall but stooped with age. Scars covered his face and arms, telling stories of 100 fights. His eyes were tired but sharp. "Inspector Holt," Mira said with relief. "Please, come in." Holt walked in slowly. He looked at Nina, and something passed between them. Recognition, not of names or faces, but of something deeper. The recognition of 2 people who had survived things that should have killed them. "Nina Reyes," Holt said. "Former colonial marine. Served on the Kepler mission until it went sideways. Sole survivor of the jungle incident on Taris 4. Spent 11 months alone in hostile territory before extraction." Nina's eyes narrowed. "You did your homework." "It is my job." Holt lowered himself into a chair with a grunt. "I keep the peace on this station. That means knowing who might disturb it." "Am I disturbing your peace?" Holt smiled tiredly. "Not mine, but you certainly disturbed Grawl's. Medical says he will never use 3 of his arms again. You destroyed the nerve clusters." Nina said nothing. "I am not here to arrest you," Holt continued. "Grawl attacked first. Everyone saw it. Self-defense is legal, even on Drift 9. He paused. "But I am here to warn you. Grawl works for a warlord named Kellen. Valorian. Runs smuggling, extortion, and worse across this whole sector. He does not forgive insults to his people. I know who Kellen is." Something in Nina's voice made Holt look at her more carefully. Mira watched the old inspector's face change as understanding dawned. "Reyes," he said slowly. "Your father was Paulo Reyes, the debt collector who worked for Kellen's operation 5 years ago." "Yes. The one who refused to burn down that refugee camp when they could not pay. The one Kellen made an example of." Nina's hands had become fists. Her voice was flat and empty. "They sent pieces of him to my mother. 1 piece every week for a month. She died 3 months later. They said it was her heart, but I know better. Kellen killed her too. He just took his time." Myra's breath caught. She had known Nina was carrying something heavy. She had seen it in the way Nina moved, the way she looked at nothing sometimes. But this was worse than she had imagined. Holt was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. "You are not here by accident," he said. "You have been waiting for this. I have been waiting for 3 years." Nina looked at him directly, tracking his operation, learning his routes, finding out where he keeps his money, his ships, his soldiers. "I knew eventually one of them would come to Drift 9. I knew eventually I would get my chance." Grawl was bait. Grawl was a monster who hurt people for fun. But yes, he was also bait. Holt rubbed his tired eyes. "Kellen will come for you now. He has to. You humiliated his best enforcer. If he does not respond, he looks weak. And men like Kellen cannot afford to look weak. I know. He will bring soldiers. Many soldiers. You cannot fight them all." Nina's smile was cold and sharp. "I survived 11 months in a jungle where everything wanted to eat me. Plants that shot poison darts. Animals that hunted in packs of 50. Insects that laid eggs in your brain while you slept. I killed things that were bigger than this room. I ate things that would make you vomit just to look at them." She stood up, wincing slightly at her ribs. "Kellen's soldiers are just men with guns. They get tired. They get scared. They make mistakes." Her eyes were hard as stone. "I do not make mistakes. Not anymore." Holt looked at her for a long time. Then he stood up slowly. "I am too old for this," he muttered. "I am supposed to keep the peace, not pick sides in a war." He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "There is a weapons locker on level 7, section 12. The lock has been broken for weeks. Nobody has gotten around to fixing it." He met Nina's eyes. "Probably nobody will get around to fixing it tonight either." Then he left. Mira looked at Nina with wide eyes. "You are really going to do this? You are going to fight all of Kellen's soldiers?" "Yes. That is insane. That is suicide." Nina walked to the small window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a ship was probably already heading toward Drift 9. A ship full of killers who thought they were hunting prey. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "My father taught me something when I was young," Nina said quietly. "He said the galaxy will try to break you. It will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. It will take everything you love and grind it to dust." She turned back to Mira. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. "But you cannot let it break you. And you cannot become the thing that tried to break you. You have to be better. You have to be stronger. Not stronger in your body, but in here." She touched her chest. "That is what separates us from the monsters." Mira did not fully understand, but she nodded anyway. "What can I do to help?" she asked. Nina smiled. A real smile this time, warm and sad and grateful. "Stay safe," she said. "Stay hidden. And when this is over, if I am still alive, have a drink waiting for me." Outside, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant and uncaring. But somewhere in the darkness, a ship was coming, and Nina Reyes was ready. Boss Kellen watched the security footage for the 15th time. His claws dug into the arms of his command chair, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Grawl was supposed to be unstoppable. Kellen had personally trained him. He had watched Grawl kill dozens of enemies with those 4 arms, had seen him tear through armored soldiers like they were made of paper. And this human, this tiny soft creature, had broken him in under 3 minutes. Kellen was a Valorian warlord. His species had conquered 12 worlds before the Galactic Council stopped them. They were built for war. 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor, with reflexes faster than any prey species could match. But even he felt something cold crawling up his spine as he watched the footage again, the way the human moved. The way she took hits that should have killed her and just kept coming. The way her eyes never showed fear, not even for a second. "Sir," one of his lieutenants stood at the door. "We are approaching Drift 9. 20 soldiers ready for deployment." Kellen closed the footage. "Make it 25. And tell them to set their weapons to lethal. No capturing. No questioning. I want her dead." "Yes, sir. But sir," the lieutenant hesitated. "The scanners say she is human. Earthborn. The warnings, I have seen the warnings." Kellen stood up, towering over his officer. "I have also seen what she is. One female. Injured. Alone. We have numbers and weapons. The warnings are just stories designed to scare children." The lieutenant did not look convinced, but he nodded and left. Kellen turned back to the window. Drift 9 grew larger as they approached. A ugly station full of ugly people. He had let it exist because it was useful. a place where his operation could move goods without too many questions. Tonight, he would remind everyone on that station who was really in charge. The ship docked an hour later. Kellen led his soldiers personally. 25 Valorian warriors in full combat armor, carrying weapons that could punch through starship hulls. They moved through the station in tight formation, their scanners sweeping every shadow. Every scanner showed the same warning whenever they got close to certain areas. Earthborn detected. Avoid contact. The soldiers were nervous. Kellen could smell their fear, and it disgusted him. Spread out, he ordered. 5 teams of 5. Sweep every level. Report contact immediately. She is one human. She cannot hide forever. The teams dispersed into the station's corridors. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in dim red. Kellen's communicator crackled with confused voices. Team 1, report. Static. Team 2, report. Sir, we are in Section 4. Nothing, wait. Wait, what is? A scream. Then nothing. Team 2. Team 2, respond. Silence. Kellen felt that cold thing crawling up his spine again. This was not possible. His soldiers were professionals. They had night vision. They had armor. They had weapons. All teams, converge on Section 4. Now, he ran through the corridors with his personal guards. The station was a maze of narrow hallways and cramped rooms. Perfect for ambushes. Perfect for hunting. They found Team 2 in a maintenance corridor. 3 bodies lay on the floor. Their armor had not saved them. Someone had found the gaps, the weak points, the places where scales met scales. The kills were precise and brutal. Out of the other 2 soldiers, there was no sign except blood trails leading into the ventilation system. One of Kellen's guards vomited. This is impossible, another whispered. How can one creature? Shut up. Kellen's voice was harsh, but inside he was screaming the same question. His communicator crackled again. Team 3 this time. Sir, we have contact. She is. No, wait, she was just here. Where did she? Gunfire. Screaming. Then silence. The pattern repeated. Team 4 found Team 3's bodies. Team 5 never responded at all. Each time, the kills were the same. Fast. Efficient. Targeting weak points that only someone who had studied Valorian anatomy would note. In his command center back on the ship, Kellen's analysts were watching through the soldiers' helmet cameras. They sent him reports filled with words like impossible speed and abnormal endurance and recommend immediate withdrawal. Kellen ignored them. He had 12 soldiers left. 12 against 1 injured human. Those should have been overwhelming odds. They found more bodies in a cargo bay. 2 soldiers this time, killed so quickly that their weapons were still holstered. The scanner data from their armor showed impossible readings. The human's heart rate had been elevated but controlled. Her movements had been faster than any human should be capable of. One of the analysts sent a new report. This one was different. Sir, we have been researching human biology. The data is concerning. Kellen read it quickly. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters. They did not outrun their prey. They followed it. For hours. For days. They walked and walked and walked until their prey collapsed from exhaustion, and then they killed it. Their bodies were designed for endurance beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They could survive injuries that would kill other species. They could keep fighting through pain that would paralyze anyone else. And when they were threatened, their brains released chemicals that made them faster, stronger, and almost impossible to stop. Kellen looked up from the report. Around him, his remaining soldiers were starting to panic. They could hear things in the darkness. Footsteps that came from everywhere and nowhere. Shadows that moved when they should not. The human was hunting them. Not fighting. Not defending. Hunting. And she was very, very good at it. Kellen made a decision. Pride could be rebuilt. Reputation could be repaired. But you needed to be alive to do those things. All units, fall back to the ship. We are leaving. He ran. His soldiers ran with him. They did not care about formation anymore. They did not care about looking strong. They just wanted to get away from the thing in the darkness. Kellen reached the airlock first. He slammed his hand against the control panel. Nothing happened. He tried again. The door stayed sealed. That a voice came from the shadows behind him. Going somewhere. Kellen spun around. His remaining soldiers raised their weapons. Nina Reyes stepped into the light. She was covered in blood, most of it not her own. Her clothes were torn. Fresh cuts marked her arms and face. But she was standing. She was always standing. And she was smiling. The airlock is locked, she said calmly. I changed the codes. Your ship's engines are disabled too. I did that first, before your soldiers even landed. Kellen stared at her. That is impossible. You could not have known. I have been planning this for 3 years. Nina took a step forward. I knew you would come. I knew how many soldiers you would bring. I knew exactly what you would do, because men like you always do the same thing. You rely on strength and numbers and fear. She took another step. But you have never fought something that is not afraid of you. Kellen's soldiers opened fire. Nina moved. Mira watched the station's security feeds from the locked storage room where she was hiding. Her small hands trembled as she clutched the old monitor. She had seen many frightening things in her life. Being a prey species in a galaxy full of predators meant you learned to be afraid early and often. But she had never seen anything like Nina Reyes at war. The soldiers fired their weapons. Energy bolts tore through the air fast enough to burn holes in metal walls. Any normal creature would have been cut to pieces in seconds. Nina was not there when the bolts arrived. She moved between the shots like she could see them coming before they were fired. Her body twisted and dodged with a grace that should have been impossible for something without wings or extra limbs. And then she was among them. The first soldier died before he could reload. Nina's hand found his throat and crushed it through his armor. The second swung at her with a blade and found himself on the ground with his arm bent backward. She was not just fighting. She was dismantling them. Mira had learned about human combat styles in school. Hundreds of different fighting systems developed over thousands of years on a world where everything wanted to kill you. Humans had turned violence into an art form. They studied it. They refined it. They passed it down through generations. Nina moved through the soldiers like a storm made of flesh and bone that a blade caught her across the back. She ignored it and broke the arm that held it. An energy bolt grazed her leg. She kept moving, limping slightly, but never slowing down. Kellen watched his soldiers fall. 9 left, then 6, then 3. He raised his own weapon and fired directly at her. The shot hit her in the shoulder. Nina stumbled back, clutching the wound. Smoke rose from burned flesh. She fell to one knee. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Nina stood up again. The wound in her shoulder was bad. Mira could see that even through the grainy security footage. 3rd-degree burns at minimum. Any other species would be screaming in agony, unable to move. Nina pulled something from her belt. A small medical injector. She jabbed it into her neck without hesitation. Kellen's 3 remaining soldiers looked at each other. One of them dropped his weapon and ran. Nina let him go. The other 2 tried to rush her together. It was over in seconds. Kellen stood alone that he was a warlord. He had killed hundreds. He had conquered settlements and crushed rebellions and built an empire of fear across 3 systems that he was shaking. What are you? He whispered. Nina walked toward him slowly. The adrenaline from the fight was fading now, and Mira could see how much pain she was in. Every step cost her something. Her shoulder was ruined. Her leg was barely working. Blood ran from cuts all over her body. But she kept coming. I am human, she said. From Earth. The place your species dismissed as a backwater death world full of weak, soft creatures. She stopped in front of him. Up close, she barely reached his chest. She should have looked pathetic next to his armored bulk. She looked like death itself. My father was Paulo Reyes, she said. He worked for you. He was a good man in a bad situation. And when you asked him to burn innocent people alive, he said no. Kellen's eyes widened with recognition. The debt collector. I remember him. You sent him back to my mother in pieces. Nina's voice cracked for the first time. Just for a second. Then the ice returned. 1 piece every week. You wanted to make an example. You wanted everyone to know what happens when someone defies Boss Kellen. That was business. That was my father. Kellen swung at her. His claws aimed for her throat. Fast enough to cut through steel. Nina caught his arm. She twisted. Something snapped. Kellen screamed and fell to his knees. I could kill you, Nina said quietly. She stood over him, his broken arm still in her grip. I have thought about it every day for 3 years. Every night, I dream about watching you die slowly, the way you made my father die. She pulled his arm tighter. Kellen screamed again. But my father taught me something. He said you cannot let the galaxy break you, and you cannot become the thing that tried to break you. For a long moment, she was silent. Mira watched her face on the security feed. She saw the war happening behind Nina's eyes. The rage fighting against something else. Something softer. You are going to make a broadcast, Nina finally said. You are going to confess to every crime your operation has committed. The murders, the extortion, the slaves you sold. Everything. If I do that, I am finished. My enemies will, I know. Nina smiled coldly. That is the point. She released his arm and stepped back. You have two choices. Make the broadcast and live with the consequences. Or refuse, and I will show you exactly what I learned in those 11 months on Taris 4. Kellen looked at her. He looked at his broken soldiers. He looked at the sealed airlock that trapped him on this station with a creature that should not exist. His species had conquered 12 worlds. They had never met anything like this. I will make the broadcast, he whispered. Nina nodded. Good choice. She turned away from him and limped toward the corridor. Her body was failing now. The adrenaline was gone. The pain was catching up, but she had won. Behind her, Kellen began composing the message that would destroy everything he had built. And somewhere in a storage room, a small felon named Mira began to cry with relief. 3 days after the battle, Drift 9 slowly returned to normal. The bodies had been cleared. The damage had been patched. The security footage had been copied so many times that it was probably playing on stations 1,000 light years away by now. Kellen's broadcast had spread even faster. The warlord had confessed to everything. Murder, extortion, slavery, corruption. By the time he finished talking, his empire was already falling apart. Former allies became enemies. Hidden victims came forward. The galactic authorities, who had looked the other way for years, suddenly found the courage to act. Boss Kellen was finished. He was alive, as Nina had promised. But alive in a prison cell, stripped of power and wealth and respect. His enemies would make sure he suffered for a very long time. Nina did not care about any of that. She sat in Myra's small apartment, staring at the wall. Her shoulder was bandaged. Her ribs were taped. A dozen smaller wounds were slowly healing. She should have felt victory. She should have felt satisfaction. She felt empty. Mira brought her a cup of something warm and sat down next to her. The small felon did not say anything. She had learned that Nina did not need words right now. She just needed someone to be there. I thought it would feel different, Nina finally said. Her voice was hoarse. I spent 3 years planning this. 3 years thinking about nothing else. And now it is over, and I do not know what to do. Mira reached out and placed her small hand on Nina's arm. What do you want to do? I do not know. Nina laughed bitterly. I was so focused on revenge that I never thought about what comes after. I never planned for a future because I did not think I would have one. A knock came at the door. Inspector Holt let himself in without waiting for an answer. He looked tired, but there was something lighter in his eyes than before. Feeling better? He asked Nina. Feeling something. Holt nodded like he understood. He probably did. Mira had learned that Holt had his own history, his own ghosts. That was why he had helped Nina, even when helping her went against everything a peacekeeper should do. The station council wanted me to deliver a message, he said. They are grateful for what you did. Kellen's operation was bleeding this station dry for years. Now that he is gone, a lot of people can breathe easier. I did not do it for them. I know. But they are grateful anyway. Holt pulled something from his pocket. A small metal badge. They also wanted me to offer you something. Nina looked at the badge. What is that? A job. Station security. The pay is terrible, and the work is dangerous, and you would have to deal with criminals and smugglers every single day. Holt smiled slightly. But you would be using those skills of yours to help people instead of just survive. Nina did not take the badge. She stared at it for a long moment. I am not a good person, she said quietly. I killed 22 soldiers in one night. I enjoyed it. When I was hurting Kellen, part of me wanted to keep going until there was nothing left. I know. Holt set the badge on the table. That is exactly why I want you on my team. The people who scare me are the ones who do not feel anything. You feel it all. You just choose to be better anyway. He walked to the door. Think about it. Take your time. The offer does not expire. Then he was gone. Mira looked at Nina. What are you going to think about? Nina picked up the badge. It was cool and heavy in her palm. Just a simple piece of metal. But it represented something she had not had in a long time. A choice. For 3 years, her path had been set. Find Kellen. Destroy Kellen. Everything else was just details. Now that path was finished, and she was standing at a crossroads. She could leave. Find another cause. Another enemy. Another purpose built on anger and pain. Or she could stay. Build something new. Try to be the person her father had believed she could be. I think, Nina said slowly, I might stay for a while. Myra's face lit up. Really? Really? Nina almost smiled. Someone has to keep you out of trouble. Mira laughed and hugged her. Nina stiffened at first. She was not used to being touched without pain involved. But slowly, she relaxed into it. Outside the apartment, the station continued its endless routine. Ships came and went. Deals were made in dark corners. Life went on, messy and complicated and full of danger. But something had changed. Word had spread across the sector. The story of the human woman who had broken a warlord with her bare hands. The footage of her walking through soldiers like they were made of smoke. The warning on every scanner, Earthborn. Avoid contact. Other species had always underestimated humans. They saw small bodies and soft skin and assumed weakness. They forgot about the death world that had forged humanity into something impossible. Now they were starting to remember that a week later, Nina walked through the station's main corridor on her first patrol as a security officer. She wore a simple uniform and carried no weapons. She did not need them. Aliens parted around her as she passed. They did not look directly at her. They did not approach her. They just moved aside and let her through. A small child from a timid species pointed at her from behind its parent. What is that? The child asked. The parent pulled the child close and whispered urgently. That is an Earthborn. Do not stare. Nina heard them. She kept walking. But somewhere deep inside, in a place that had been cold and empty for 3 years, something warm began to grow. She was not just a weapon anymore. She was a protector. And for the first time since her father died, Nina Reyes felt like she might actually be okay. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of monsters. But it also had room for heroes, human heroes, the deadliest kind.